Byron York joins me, he of the Washington Examiner and Fox News fame. Good morning, Byron. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
Did you watch 60 Minutes?
I watched 60 Minutes, and by the way, I also listened to Call Her Daddy.
Okay. Now, I did not listen to Call Her Daddy. Why don't we begin with you telling us what happened on that, what it is, and what my audience needs to know?
Well, Call Her Daddy is a very, very popular podcast, and it is directed at young women. And it was this podcast was in Kamala Harris, I believe, talked for about 40 to 45 minutes with the hostess of Call Her Daddy, and which is a lot longer than time about abortion. Obviously, the host of Call Her Daddy said at the very beginning, I've got a huge audience, and I try not to get too political because I don't want to divide my audience. But this is so important that I'm going to get political and divide my audience, which is what she did.
So I don't believe there's anyone who's going to vote on the issue of abortion or life, however one chooses to determine, who hasn't already made up their mind, right?
That's right.
So is this an exercise in turnout?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, I think we're entering that phase with both campaigns. Trump is doing, as always, some interesting things. He's going to California, and then he's going to go out to Colorado to visit Aurora. But some of his rallies are in places where he's going to win, but the campaign believes there are still more reachable voters who would be Trump voters. So I think that we'll see both campaigns doing that kind of thing.
One of the interesting things the former president does is talk to talk show hosts like me. And whenever he comes on, he knows I'm going to talk almost exclusively about national security, and I did. He's very direct. Israel got a right to respond, and whatever they hit, we should support him in doing it. I do not hear Kamala Harris being that direct. Do you think that matters to Jewish Americans and other Americans who are not Jewish who support the state of Israel?
Well, I would broaden the subject a little bit on the 60 Minutes interview, which is she didn't answer anything directly, but it was the first even somewhat adversarial interview that I had seen her take part in, more so than the CNN dual interview with Tim Walz, more so than the Stephanie Rule interview on MSNBC. Bill Whitaker of CBS actually did follow-up questions when she failed to answer them. And I thought, first of all, I thought it was just a disastrous interview. I thought her weakest parts were on the border and the portion that you played on Ukraine, in which she just appeared to have no idea what to do in Ukraine. And didn't even say, well, I know what to do in Ukraine, but I don't think it's a good idea to talk about it. Didn't even say that.
I do think it was a disastrous interview. David Drucker didn't want to say that, doesn't agree with us. But why? I have my own reasons, because if you repeatedly don't answer a direct question on the stand, people think you're a liar. I'm not sure if that's true on television, but do you think it is?
Well, I think the questions were very clear, and again on the border, Whitaker's basic thing was, look, he kind of asked it diplomatically, saying, I, Bill Whitaker, I've covered immigration at the border for a while, and I know this is not a problem that just popped up when you became vice president, but there was an enormous historic flood of illegal border crossers when you did become vice president, and she completely did not address that. And then he said, well, did you wait too long? When she said, oh, Donald Trump killed a bill that could have solved the whole problem. He said, well, did you wait too long by letting this thing go for 3 years before the bill? And she again did not answer the question. So I do think you're right that when you get really direct questions like, well, did you wait too long, by waiting 3 years, people know you're not answering the question.
That brings me to cut number 7. Let's play for Byron York. Cut number 7 of Kamala's take off into the ether. He didn't mention groceries, Byron. He did a bold underline capital letters groceries. Then he did a fact. They're up 25%. Then he did another fact. People are blaming you and Joe Biden. And then he asked the question, are they wrong? And she talked about unemployment. I mean, what does I'm not an average viewer. You're not an average viewer. We have to guess. What does an average viewer think about that?
Well, the average viewer hears her saying, I don't want to talk about it.
I asked Trump yesterday, one of the few domestic questions was, what about the $25,000 for new home builders? And Trump said, that'll push up prices $100,000. I don't know if that's right, but they're going to go up at least $25,000. She doesn't know anything about economics, Byron. I mean, does anyone think she knows what she's talking about on economics?
No, I think the issue here is just giving people stuff. I mean, that's basically her entire program, which is to give the taxpayers more government transfers with which to pay higher prices, which I think most people would say is going to lead to higher prices. Because obviously, if the government gives somebody $25,000 to buy a product, the price of that product is going to go up. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. I mean, look at what happened with student loans and college tuitions. So, but that's the bulk of her program. It's the expanded child tax credit, which, by the way, Trump and Vance, or certainly Vance, want to do. And it's the $50,000 to start a small business, and it's the $25,000.
That makes no sense.
Home.
That 50, I have no idea what that means. Byron, let me ask you about the inside workings of turnout. We've seen North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, Northern Georgia, and a bit of Southwestern Virginia savaged. I haven't seen any follow-up on what that does to voting. Asheville, of course, is a dark blue dot in the middle of a red sea of the mountain people. Any idea on what this does to voting turnout and availability of machines? Has anyone reported on that yet?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is it's going to hurt it. And the Trump campaign is quite concerned about this. And I believe, and it could be today, the North Carolina legislature is going to be addressing what are the things we can do to make sure people can still vote, even amid the devastation that we've seen in the western part of the state. So I don't know exactly what they are going to do, but it is actually a real concern. And, and as you know and have been reporting, it also hit Georgia. It also hit South Carolina. There are also all sorts of other places. But this is the worst in terms of people literally not being able to get around.
And they don't have internet. Even if they wanted to do internet voting, and I'm not sure they do, they don't have, I guess they have Starlink now, but that raises all sorts of problems. What about now? Well, let me go to break for a moment. I'll be right back with Byron. I got to ask him about Florida and the vote that will be impacted there almost certainly by the arrival of Hurricane Milton tomorrow night or Thursday morning. Milton is going to crash in somewhere on the Florida coast at least a hurricane level 4. Again, DeSantis is pretty good at this. They've dealt with this before, but what about turnout? What does Team Trump need to do, and what do they think? And then I got to ask him about Michigan, because the story this morning on Kamala Harris's problem in Michigan is pretty significant. The Mideast war threatens Harris in Michigan as Arab voters reject her, according to the New York Times. I'll be back with Byron during the break. Stay tuned. I am back with Byron York, who you can follow at Byron York. You can read his daily newsletter at the Washington Examiner. Of course, you see him on Fox News. Byron, when Milton crashes into Florida, they'll still have 3 weeks before the election. Hopefully people have left in great numbers. Do they expect them to come back in time to vote?
That's unclear, because we don't know what's going to happen. And Ron DeSantis was on Fox News just a few minutes ago saying, look, it's projected to kind of hit right toward Tampa, but it could go north, it could go south. We don't know where it's going to actually hit. Hurricanes have changed course in the past. So I don't know. They do have some time. There's a lot of Election Day voting in Florida, so perhaps they can make this happen, but it's got to be a big worry.
Well, I will pay attention to the North Carolina story as they act on that because turnout in the mountains usually favors the Republicans. Turnout in
Yeah.
Asheville favors the Democrats, but it's not going to be top of mind for people who've lost everything. Let me turn to the story in the New York Times. The Mideast war threatens Harris in Michigan as Arab voters reject her. Before President Trump came on the program yesterday, I had done the Arab Institute polling research. They say it's 42% Trump, 41% Harris nationally among Arab Americans. And I asked him why, and he said, because I'll bring peace back. What do you think is going on here, Byron?
I don't quite, I don't entirely understand what's going on, but I do think there are two things about Michigan. One, this this is a very hard story to split the baby on. I mean, you might as well just advocate what you think is right, because there are groups that you're not going to be able to mollify. The other thing, as far as Michigan is concerned, is that I think if Trump wins Michigan, it's going to be because of electric cars. I really think it's because you've got one candidate who clearly wants to phase out internal combustion cars as quickly as possible, and everybody knows that. When she says she doesn't want that anymore, no, they know that she wants it.
I agree. Let me close by asking you about the Tim Walz J.D. Vance debate. I think if any vice presidential debate ever mattered, that one did, and that it might have a marginal impact on a lot of different people. What do you think, Byron?
Yeah, I was actually there and talked afterwards to Chris LaCivita, the co-manager of the Trump campaign. I said, "Well, what do you think was the key moment in the debate?" And he said, "The first 20 seconds." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "It was because the question was about the world falling apart, chaos, violence, disaster, all sorts of things happening, and he had this deer in the headlights look, and he didn't know how to answer, and from that very moment, he set a bad tone for himself."
Well, that got asked by Bill Whitaker last night. I don't know if you stuck around for the Whitaker part. Let's play cut time for the whole thing. But he said, "People know me." What do you think, Byron? Do people know him?
No, it didn't work. As a matter of fact, he Whitaker said, "Well, that isn't this more than just being a knucklehead?" And he said, "People know me," and you thought, "No, they don't." And
No,
this is not a good way to get acquainted.
it is not. And so, jump balls. Everything matters at the when we're close to the end of a close game. Everything matters. Byron York, thank you. Follow him on X at Byron York. Follow me to the next segment.